More than one-third of Americans have felt looked down on simply because they were different. But at a glittering gala inside the Veridian House, a single slap froze the air. Glass shattered. Gasps tore through the crowded hall, all eyes locked on a black woman standing quietly in the storm of judgment. "You don't belong here!" The words cut the room like a blade, sharp and merciless. And in the middle of that chaos, a softer sound broke through. The faint chime of a bronze bell. Soft golden light spilled from crystal chandeliers, bathing the elegance of Veridian House. The restaurant crowned the slope of Nob Hill, its polished floors shining like mirrors, candlelight flickering across faces dressed in finery. The clink of silverware on white porcelain kept time with the gentle jazz floating from a piano in the corner. The air felt both warm and tense, as if the room itself waited for an unseen curtain to rise. At a table by the expansive glass windows, Maya Ellis smoothed the hem of her simple blue dress. The fabric was calm, soft, and unassuming. Her eyes fell on the water glass, catching her reflection. A young black woman who'd grown up on the cramped streets of Baltimore, now seated among wealth she never truly felt part of. Inside it was a discordant note, pride and unease entwined. Her husband, Cole Harrington, had stepped away moments earlier to take a call from a partner in Japan. His deep, steady voice still carried faintly from the bar. 5 minutes, he'd promised. But in those minutes, Maya felt the room shift. Around her, gowns shimmered like galaxies. Necklaces blazed in the candlelight. Only her dress seemed quiet, still, like the darkness pressing against the windows. A sudden rush of perfume swept close. A tall figure, blonde hair gleaming, a white gown sculpted to perfection. Lydia St. Clair stopped at Maya's table. Her eyes slid from the flat shoes to the modest silver necklace, then rested on Maya's calm face. There was no curiosity in that gaze, only cold disdain. "Excuse me," Lydia said, her voice soft but pitched for nearby tables to hear. "There must be some mistake. This table isn't meant for someone like you." A spoon clattered faintly somewhere, drawing glances. Maya lifted her head, her deep brown eyes meeting that icy stare. Her heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. "I'm not mistaken. This is my table." Lydia's smile curled thin, never reaching her eyes. The mix of Chanel perfume and the chill of her jewelry thickened the air. "Really? Alone? In a dress this modest? I thought you'd lost your way." Murmurs rippled. Someone whispered, "Maybe the staff misseated her." Another stifled a laugh. Maya felt the weight of a dozen stares, harsh as spotlights. Childhood memories surged, being chased from corner stores, the sneers of "you don't belong here." Her hand trembled against the glass, but she gripped it firmly, letting the cold anchor her. "I'm waiting for my husband," she said evenly, each word clipped and clear. Lydia glanced around, then raised her voice. "A husband? How convenient. Where is he? Or did you just imagine him?" The bitter laugh that followed made a few cover their mouths, amusement breaking through. Shame pressed like heavy fog. Yet within it, a spark caught fire. Maya drew a breath, straightened her back. "He'll be right back. I have every right to sit here, just like anyone else." For a moment, Lydia faltered, but then her face twisted with fury. Her heels struck sharply against the wooden floor, and in the next instant, her manicured hand flashed. Crack! The slap split the room, shattering the lazy rhythm of jazz. The restaurant froze. Forks stopped midair. Wine glasses hovered untouched. Heat seared across Maya's cheek, a sting that throbbed straight to her heart. Yet she didn't crumble. Her hand lifted, trembling as it brushed her face, but her eyes stayed locked, unbroken. Not a single tear fell. The silence was crushing. A knife dropped somewhere, its clang echoing like an alarm. Dozens of eyes fixed on her, humiliated in public, yet sitting tall, steel in her spine. In that instant, Maya understood. This was a turning point not just for the evening, but for her life. From across the room, the piano fell silent, strings humming with a sorrowful aftertone. And then came the sound of hurried footsteps from the bar, heavy, decisive, closing in. Footsteps pounded across the polished floor, each strike echoing like a drum beat. Cole Harrington returned to the table, his eyes sweeping over the frozen scene, wine glass suspended midair, Maya's cheek burning red, and Lydia St. Clair standing rigid, her hands still half raised. The room seemed to compress. The jazz had gone silent, leaving only the steady tick of the wall clock, each beat like a hammer against every witness's chest. Cole placed his hand firmly on Maya's shoulder, his voice cold as steel. "You just put your hand on my wife?" Several diners swallowed hard. A woman dropped her napkin, the soft thud piercing the tense quiet. Maya felt the warmth of Cole's hand on her shoulder, but the sting of humiliation still burned across her face. A moment ago, she had been utterly alone. Now she felt shielded, though not yet safe. Daniel Cho, the restaurant manager, hurried over. His voice shook as he tried to smooth things over. "Sir, perhaps we should invite Mrs. St. Clair to a private room, just to—" He didn't finish. Cole's sharp gaze cut him off. "Who exactly do you think should be leaving?" The question landed heavily, forcing Daniel into silence. For an instant, the injustice was apparent. The victim could be asked to leave, while the aggressor remained because of her name. The thought made Maya's chest tighten. Her fingers gripped the water glass, the chill seeping into her skin and steadying her. Her voice came low but firm. "I'm at my table. I'm not going anywhere." It was a small act, but it carried quiet dignity. Lydia let out a dry laugh, lips curling crimson. "Dignity? Your very presence here stains this place." Her words sliced the air like a blade, deepening the suffocating silence. Maya flinched for a second, then lifted her chin. Her gaze was calm, like a lake before the storm, though inside waves crashed hard. From being cornered, she rose once more. At a far table, Arthur Green, a retired judge, set down his spoon. The metallic strike against porcelain rang sharply, making the room pause. His gravelly voice carried, "I've witnessed everything from the very beginning." Not a single word missed, murmurs rippled, and for the first time, Lydia's face blanched. Her lips trembled before she forced her mask of arrogance back in place. Cole drew his phone, raising the glowing screen. "My call with the Japanese partner is logged," he said, voice steady. "The record shows exactly when I left and when I returned, right as the commotion began." The evidence was plain, undeniable. The room stirred, shaken by facts that left no escape. The glow from the phone lit Cole's face, sharp, resolute. For Maya, a faint spark of hope flickered amid the prying eyes. The tension stretched thin. Daniel, desperate, stepped forward. "Please, everyone, remain calm. Everything will be handled." But his words fell flat, drowned out by whispers rising from every side. The murmurs no longer targeted Maya. They now questioned Lydia. Time dragged like a taut wire. Maya felt every stare pressing into her. Each minute stretched unbearably long. The wall clock marked 3 minutes, though it felt like an entire act waiting for its curtain. Arthur leaned forward, fixing Lydia with a direct stare. "Justice doesn't side with the loudest voice. It sides with the truth." His eyes gleamed, embers of wisdom bright enough to light the whole room. Maya wanted to speak, but her throat tightened. She turned to Cole instead, her eyes shimmering, tears threatening but refusing to fall. It was a fragile, defiant moment, caught between breaking and holding strong. The atmosphere surged toward a breaking point. Lydia stepped forward, voice sharp as glass. "She doesn't belong here." The words slammed against the windows, harsh and metallic. Cole opened his mouth ready to answer, but his words were swallowed by a sudden crash of chords from the piano, the musician striking too hard, the sound slicing through the silence. The harsh chord from the piano still hung in the air, slicing the evening like a blade. Cole Harrington's words broke off mid-sentence, left dangling like a napkin dropped, but never caught. The room was silent, every slight sound, ragged breath, the faint clink of silver on porcelain, echoing louder than it should. Lydia St. Clair lifted her chin, crimson lips curling into a scornful smile. "Everyone in this room saw it," she declared, her voice clear as crystal, but edged with thorns. "She doesn't belong here, and you know it." Her perfume spread heavy, mixing with the rich scent of roasted meat, thickening the air until it was hard to breathe. Maya Ellis set her glass down, the faint click of glass against wood sharp as a signal. Cole's grip still warmed her hand, but her cheek burned hot as fire. She rose slightly, steadying herself, trying to show she wasn't afraid. It was a small motion, but it carried her dignity. "Sit down." Lydia's voice came low and pressing, her heels striking the floor like a judge's gavel. "Don't ruin everyone else's evening." Her words fell heavy, crushing. A stray laugh cracked from a corner table, but it died quickly under the weight of cautious stares. Daniel Cho, the manager, rushed in, desperate to douse the flames. "Please, let's keep order. Everything will be handled." His voice trembled, stretched thin, but Cole's eyes cut through him, sharp and unyielding. "Handled how?" he pressed, pulling out his phone, the glow lighting his stern face. "My call ended just before the commotion. I came running back immediately." At another table, Arthur Green set his spoon down. The metallic strike rang across the room. His words dropped slow and steady, each one rippling like a stone in water. "I saw everything. Not a word missed." His aged but burning gaze was like embers reignited in a cold hearth, sparking new hope for Maya. Maya reached into her purse, pulling out the reservation slip. The paper was creased, the ink smudged, but the words were clear. She slid it toward Daniel, her voice low but firm. "This is our table." At that moment, Rosa, the young server, paused. She placed her silver tray on the side table, the metallic ring extended and resonant, like a silent witness. Her eyes lingered on Maya's face, carrying unspoken sympathy. Lydia laughed again, brittle and hollow, like a cracked glass about to shatter. "Anyone can print a piece of paper," she sneered, snapping a nail against her wine glass with a shrill ping. "Status doesn't come from cheap scraps." Daniel drew a breath, his gaze flickering between Cole and Maya. "We keep reservation logs," he said at last, "and audio recordings from the mic in the corner." "I'll check." His words sliced the haze, opening a path toward truth. A new tension swelled as Rosa hurried to the counter, her small frame moving with quiet resolve. Whispers spread across the room like raindrops on a roof. When she returned with a folder and a pair of headphones, the room stretched tight as a string. Daniel slid the headset on, pressing play with shaking hands. A faint crackle, then a woman's voice rang out. "This table isn't for someone like you." Then came the sharp crack of the slap, so vivid it felt like it struck the glass walls themselves. The entire room jolted. A man slammed his glass down, wine spilling across the white cloth like sudden tears. Arthur tilted his head, his old eyes blazing, a blade of truth flashing bright after years in silence. Near the piano, a bronze bell hung still. Its cord trembled, brushing Rosa's tray and letting out a fragile chime that cut straight to the soul. It wasn't loud, but it carried like a call for justice. Lydia forced a smile, but her lips shook, her eyes restless like a candle about to snuff out. "Judge Green, perhaps you misheard." Her voice cracked, clinging to denial. Arthur simply shook his head, calm and immovable, solid as stone against the tide. Cole leaned forward, setting a white envelope on the table. Its corner caught the light, revealing the words, "Internal briefing." His voice dropped, cold and hard. "If necessary, I'll let the whole city hear this." His words cut deep, but he let them hang, unfinished, heavy in the silence. At the end, Rosa glanced at the bronze bell. Her hand trembled as she reached for the cord, ready to ring the first note of truth. The bronze bell still quivered in Rosa's hand, its cord catching the soft golden light from above. The room erupted in whispers, silverware clattering, chairs scraping hard against the wooden floor. The scent of spilled wine, half-burned candles, and sharp perfume mixed thick, making the air stifling. Maya Ellis sat still, her hand resting on the table's edge, her eyes searching for calm in Rosa's hesitant gaze. Lydia St. Clair spun on her heel, the strike of her shoes landing like blows against the heart. Her laugh rang brittle, sharp as shattered glass. "A bell? A waitress? That's your evidence?" She swept her eyes around, fishing for agreement. A few diners nodded, their murmurs falling like scattered rain, isolating Maya further. Cole Harrington tightened his grip on his wife's hand. His voice rumbled low, steady. "It's all been recorded. Everyone in this room heard it." He barely finished when Lydia snatched a glass of red wine from a nearby table and hurled it down. The crash exploded, liquid spreading like blood, staining a gentleman's polished shoes. Gasps and cries broke out. Truth and chaos collided, blurring the line between right and wrong. Maya drew in a breath, her chest burning from the sour scent. She rose, fire in her eyes, though her tone stayed calm. No one has the right to humiliate another. The words struck like arrows, but instead of support, they sparked a wave of pushback. A woman in silk hissed, "She caused this!" A man beside her added, "Yes, she's embarrassing everyone here." The accusations fell heavy as stones, driving Maya back step by step until her spine pressed against the cold glass. In that crushing moment, Daniel Cho returned, his hands shaking as he held a file from the system. The paper was yellowed in the light, but the names were clear. Maya and Cole, reservation confirmed. His voice rasped but held firm. They have every right to be here. A faint breeze of relief brushed the room, but it wasn't strong enough to clear the cloud of doubt. Rosa turned quickly and clipped the edge of a table. Her silver tray tilted, sending a glass sliding. It shattered at Maya's feet, shards scattering, one slitting the edge of her sleeve. The tear was small, but enough to make the crowd flinch. Maya froze, her hand clenched, her heart pounding against her ribs as if it might break free. The fragility of standing at the edge had never felt sharper. Arthur Green, silent until now, placed his thin hands on the table. His gravelly voice carried slowly and sure. Truth doesn't shatter like glass. It remains no matter how hard people deny it. The words dropped heavy in the air, shifting eyes across the room. Lydia spun, laughing harshly. A retired old man? A waitress? That's your witness? Her pitch rose, clinging to power, slipping through her fingers. From the tech station, a young employee stepped forward, headphones in hand. Sweat lined his brow, but his voice rang clear. I heard the recording. There's the sound of a slap, and the words, someone like you, plain as day. His statement pierced the haze, turning murmurs into suffocating silence. And then, the bronze bell chimed again from the corner. This time, no one touched it. A draft slipping through the door carried its low, resonant tone, making heads turn in uneasy awe. Cole leaned toward Maya, his eyes lit with fierce resolve. He drew breath to speak, but Lydia cut across, her voice sharp and defiant. You dare take me to court? The challenge slashed through the air, freezing the room. Cole's lips pressed tight, his breath thick in his chest. His reply hung suspended, unspoken, as the silence pressed in. The room fell silent after Lydia's sharp question, leaving only the thud of hearts skipping inside chests. Cole froze, his lips pressed tight, words locked behind them. Beside him, Maya Ellis stood tall, the red mark still bright on her cheek, her eyes fierce yet proud. But under the weight of the crowd, she felt pushed to the edge, her back against the cold pane of glass. A middle-aged woman at a nearby table let out a harsh laugh, sharp as broken glass. Court? Everyone here saw she doesn't belong. Voices followed, scattered at first, then swelling like a bitter wind rising to a storm. Maya clenched her hands until her knuckles whitened. Her heart sank like a small boat about to be swallowed by the waves. She drew a breath and lifted her head. Her eyes found Cole's, just for a fleeting second, but enough to steady her. She straightened her back, refusing to step back again. Her words came softly, almost a whisper, but carried deep inside. I'm not going anywhere. Fragile as a thread, yet it held her dignity firm against the gale. The air pressed heavily until a sudden clatter broke from the service counter. Rosa, the young server, rushed forward with a wrinkled slip of paper, its edges smudged, the ink faint, but the name stood clear. Maya and Cole, their reservation marked, their table confirmed. Rosa laid it down, her hand trembling, but her eyes shone bright, handing Maya a lantern in the dark. For a moment, hope flickered through the room. Lydia hissed, her voice sharp between clenched teeth. A piece of paper? Anyone can print one. Then with a sudden swipe, she knocked the candle from the center of the table. The flame flared, wax spilling across the white cloth, leaving a scorched black trail. Panic swept through. Chairs scraped, voices shouted. In the chaos, Cole lunged, smothering the fire with his bare hand. The smell of burned skin filled the air, stunning the room into silence. Maya stared at his hand, the fingers red and raw. Her eyes glistened, ready to break, but she held back, whispering, "You didn't have to do that." Cole forced a small, pained smile, warm as a lantern flame battling the storm. A few tables sighed aloud, hearts stirred by his act of quiet sacrifice. Arthur Green, the old judge, slowly took the file from Daniel Cho. He opened each page, the light glinting off his glasses. The words plain: reservation, 7:45, window table. He tapped the page, his voice gravelly but firm. "Not just paper. This is the restaurant's official record." Truth flowed out like cool water across the desert, and the murmurs began to die. Just then, an odd sound rose from the piano. The musician rested a hand on the keys, then pointed to the microphone. "The system's still alive. I've replayed it. Everyone here will hear it." The room trembled with anticipation, suspicion giving way to a restless hunger for clarity. Maya closed her eyes for a beat, letting her breath touch the sting on her cheek, letting the smell of wax and wine drift past. She opened them again, her voice low but certain. "Truth doesn't need ornaments. It speaks for itself." The words opened a door, and the room swayed between silence and the edge of eruption. Lydia forced a smile, but the corners of her lips trembled. "You think this is enough?" Her eyes flashed, desperate, plotting a final strike. Cole turned, his gaze sharp as a blade, lips parting to answer. Yet his reply hung suspended in the thick, waiting air. The room still held its breath after Cole's unfinished words. Maya felt his breath warm against her shoulder, his eyes blazing like a lamp determined to burn until the very end. There was no turning back. The truth had to stand here, in the same place many thought it would be buried. Cole slowly opened the white envelope he had placed on the table earlier. The crackle of paper cut through the silence, each printed line shining like sparks in the dark. He raised the document high, his voice low but thunderous. "This is a copy of my company's press briefing. If justice isn't upheld tonight, the entire city will know by morning." The words struck like arrows into the wall of silence. Lydia faltered, her arrogant smile twisting into a crooked line. She tossed her hair, voice biting. "You'd turn something so small into a public spectacle?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded toward Cole, others clicked their tongues, uneasy at the scale. The divide ran like a red line, heating the air with urgency. Maya's heart pounded as she looked around. She lifted her half-empty glass, drank, and let the cold water soothe her parched throat. But inside, the fire only grew. Her voice carried, soft yet sharp. "If I must stand in front of everyone to protect dignity, I will." The words rang out like the strike of a small bronze bell, touching hearts across the room. Daniel Cho stepped forward, holding the restaurant's file. His voice shook, then steadied. "I've checked the system. Names, time, table, all match. There's no denying it." He lifted his head, weary but resolute, like a pillar bracing against storm winds. His words drew quiet nods, and the protest began to fade. Then a sudden surge. Lydia lunged toward the table, hand outstretched to snatch the papers from Cole. But Rosa moved faster. She rushed forward, blocking her path, eyes blazing. "No one touches them now," she declared, her voice trembling yet fierce. The room gasped, stunned by the courage of a young server who stood her ground. The air seethed, then hushed. Just as it seemed the storm might ease, a faint click echoed from the corner. Arthur Green raised his worn phone, its dim screen glowing. He pressed play. Lydia's voice spilled out, sharp and undeniable. "This table isn't for someone like you." Truth no longer rested in testimony. It lived, raw and inescapable, in sound. Maya clenched her fist as tears finally slipped down her cheek. But they weren't tears of defeat. She stood tall, drawing a deep breath, the scent of melted wax, wine, and aged wood wrapping her in the memory of a night that would not be forgotten. Her gaze met Lydia's. No fury, only the calm of someone who had crossed the edge and returned. The crowd shifted. Heavy stares softened into sympathy. A single clap broke the silence. Hesitant at first, then others joined, rising into a wave of applause. Lydia staggered, lips moving, searching for words, but the tide of clapping drowned every excuse. Cole turned to Maya, his voice steady as stone. "Do you want to?" His question hung unfinished, carried above the roar of hands, the room waiting for the final decision that only she could give. Applause spread like a downpour, pounding the glass walls of Veridian House. Maya stood still, her hand trembling but her eyes steady, glowing like a lantern freshly lit. Cole leaned toward her, his unfinished question hanging. Yet the room's full attention now belonged to them. Lydia St. Clair gripped her wine glass so tight the veins in her hand stood out. Her laugh rang shrill, scraping like metal on glass. "You think a few claps will change anything?" "This is still my place, my world," her voice echoed, clinging to power that was crumbling fast. Maya drew a deep breath, her palm pressed against the cool wooden table, grounding her. She lifted her head, her voice measured but firm. "The world doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to those who show respect." The words drifted like a breeze, yet sliced the heavy air, drawing whispers of agreement. Suddenly, Lydia lunged for the file in Daniel's hands. The manager fumbled, nearly dropping it, but Cole steadied it just in time. Pages slipped free, scattering under the chandelier's light. One sheet landed at Rose's feet. She stooped, eyes bright, and declared, "There's an electronic signature here, and the system's seal. It can't be faked." The room fell silent. Her voice, small but unwavering, pinned truth into place like a nail in stone. Lydia's face drained. Her hands shook. The glass slipped, and it shattered on the floor. Red wine spread across the wood like an open wound exposed for all to see. The crowd stirred, whispers turning, eyes shifting toward Maya, not with doubt, but with respect. Arthur Green rose, his chair scraping the floor with a weighty sound, a tolling bell of its own. He raised his hand, voice rough but resolute. "There is no doubt. I sat on the bench for decades, and tonight I see it clearly. This is evidence. This is truth." His words struck hearts, bringing tears to many eyes. Maya felt her own welling, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she smiled faintly, her hand brushing the sting on her cheek. The simple gesture burned with dignity, untouchable by anyone. The crowd hushed, waiting for justice to speak aloud. The climax swelled as Cole clasped Maya's hand, leading her to the center of the room. He raised the intact file high, his voice rolling like thunder. "Tonight, truth is laid bare before us all. If anyone still doubts, look at the evidence. Look into my wife's eyes and listen to your own conscience." His words reverberated against the walls, reflecting across every face. Lydia staggered off balance, her eyes wild. She tried to speak, but her throat locked. Then from the corner, the bronze bell rang again, this time strong and clear, Rosa pulling the cord. The deep chime spread wide, a verdict carried on sound. Cole turned to Maya, his eyes full yet solemn. He tilted his head, lips parting, ready to deliver the decision the entire room waited to hear. Cole's words hung in the thick air. The crowd held its breath, the chandelier light casting long streaks across the polished floor, revealing every tense face. Then, like a wave breaking, applause rose again, this time strong, unified, without hesitation. Maya closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her like a cool stream cleansing away the bitterness she had endured. Arthur Green stepped forward, the file in his hand now standing as undeniable proof. He placed it on the table, tapped it once, and spoke in a gravelly but firm voice. "The decision of this restaurant and of everyone here tonight is to honor the truth." Maya and Cole did nothing wrong. His words struck like hammer blows, sealing shut the door on falsehood. Lydia St. Clair's face drained of color, lipstick smudging at the corners of her trembling mouth. A manager approached, laying a sealed envelope before her. Inside, the words were clear and final. "Suspension of all honorary positions." The ink was still fresh, its sting colder than stone. Lydia staggered, her arms falling limp, her eyes hollow like someone who had lost their home. The crowd parted, and Rosa stepped forward. She placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder, her smile bright and pure as sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. "You weren't alone," she said softly, yet everyone heard. Maya looked at her, tears glistening, and nodded. Warmth spread through her chest, as if the embrace of a community had wrapped around her. Cole opened his briefcase and drew out a silver-etched membership card. He held it high, his voice clear. "This is the permanent membership card Lydia herself signed and gave us. It affirms that we belong here." The card caught the light, gleaming like a symbol no one could deny. The room erupted in handshakes and congratulations. A silver-haired gentleman clasped Cole's hand tightly. "You've shown us that justice never loses its worth." A young woman offered Maya a small flower from her table, its fragrance gentle, reminding all that dignity blooms even in hardship. And then from the corner, the bronze bell rang once more. Its deep tone carried, though no hand touched it, only the night wind slipping through the door. Maya lifted her head, her eyes shining, feeling that truth's call would echo far beyond this room. She turned to Cole, her lips parting, ready to speak. Maya's words lingered unfinished beneath the ringing of the bronze bell. She turned to Cole, nodded gently, then faced the room that had finally fallen quiet. Veridian House seemed brighter, as though moonlight itself had been poured across the wooden floor. Faces once rigid now softened, warmth spreading slowly like hot water through cold hands. Daniel Cho stepped forward, careful as if carrying a fragile glass. He placed the case file on the table, his voice low but kind. "Tonight, the restaurant makes it official. We apologize for not standing on the right side sooner." The sound was no more than a dry crack of wood in a fire. He bowed slightly to Maya, then looked around, opening his hand as though inviting everyone to share the responsibility. Rosa came next, her hand still carrying the faint scent of silver trays. She opened the guest ledger to a blank page. At the top she wrote, "Commitment to respect." The first signature was round and clear. Rosa Alvarez. A silver-haired man followed, then a middle-aged couple. The names stretched out like lanterns drifting down a river. Maya stood still, her shoulders easing, the burn on her cheek softening with every stroke of the pen. Arthur Green removed his glasses, wiping them with the corner of a napkin. He lifted the piano's microphone and set it down as if laying a stone of record. "The recording will be attached to the file," he said, his gravelly voice firm. The room hushed, the draft through the door carrying warmth like blood flowing through veins again. Lydia St. Clair sat down, her painted mask collapsing in her eyes. Daniel handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, the words cut like a blade. "Removal of honors, her name withdrawn from the patron council." She pressed her lips tight, then rose without the clatter of proud heels. The crowd didn't cheer. They opened a silent path for her to leave, as one makes way for a storm gone astray. The piano returned with a circle of warm chords. Maya clasped Cole's hand, still marked by the sting of fire he had smothered. She leaned close, whispering, "Let's go home, but don't let it end here." Her words were a door left ajar, with someone waiting on the other side. The glass doors opened. The Nob Hill wind carried pine and the scent of rain. On the steps, strangers shook Cole's hand and touched Maya's shoulder. "Thank you," one woman murmured, her voice soft as a sun-warmed towel. A young man asked for a picture. They stood close, their smiles trembling, but true. At the eave, a small bronze bell swayed. Rosa hung beside it a wooden plaque carved with the words, "When you see kindness, pull the bell." Below it lay a pen tied with twine, ready for the next person to sign the commitment to respect. Daniel buttoned his jacket, eyes bright as if he'd found a long-lost key. The next morning, harbor lights opened early. Sunlight spilled over the bookshelves, dust motes sparking like tiny fireworks. Maya laid an envelope on the table. Veridian House's apology letter, the official record with the audio link, and the silver membership card. The children touched the card's edge, cool as a river stone. "Tell us," a little girl asked. Maya smiled, the scent of new paper warm as fresh bread. She didn't speak of broken glass. She told of the line of signatures, of the sound of truth finding its voice. When she read the words "commitment to respect," the room fell still, broken only by the rhythm of young pens tapping. Maya lifted the silver card, its shine sweeping across wide eyes, then handed it to Rosa, who arrived with a box of pastries to keep behind the counter, a promise that more cards would come. Arthur brought an old wooden frame. He hung inside it a sheet bearing one line, set beneath a black and white photo of a classroom. Never stay silent when the bell must be rung. When he stepped back, hands folded before him, it was as though he'd laid down the final stone of a long burden. Cole placed a starter donation on the counter, then joked, "For a spare bell rope." Laughter broke out, round and sweet as caramel, melting on the tongue. Evening settled, and Nob Hill grew calm again. Veridian House laid fresh tablecloths, the stains gone, the air scented with soap. Outside the doors, Maya saw her reflection in the glass, not lost as she had been that first night. A young boy passing by asked, "Ma'am, is the bell loud?" She smiled, placed her hand on the rope, and pulled gently. The chimes spread out, warm as an embrace. That night, as harbor lights closed, Maya dimmed the lamps one by one. The final door shut, leaving the fragrance of paper lingering like a whisper. She placed one hand on her cheek, where the burn had cooled, and the other over her heart. Outside, the sea wind stirred the trees, their leaves clapping together like unseen hands offering comfort. Night had fallen deep, and harbor lights glowed only with a faint yellow beam through a small window. Maya closed the wooden door, her hand still carrying the scent of paper, and lifted her face toward the sea wind rushing by. In that moment, she thought she heard a bronze bell ring somewhere, fragile yet strong enough to stir her heart, echoing the first instant when an entire room held its breath before injustice. From that single quiet sound, justice had found its own voice. Cole stepped close and clasped his wife's hand. His eyes shone clear, like moonlight spread across water. Together, they looked at the silver card resting on the table, now a symbol of a shared promise. A promise that respect isn't reserved for a few, but the right of every human being. Nearby, Rosa quietly pinned another page of commitment to respect into the wooden frame, fresh ink joining old signatures like a circle of hands that never breaks. Out on the porch, a young boy tugged the bell's rope. Its tone rolled out, slow and warm, reminding all that justice will keep ringing, if we dare to reach for it. Maya smiled softly, her hand touching the cheek where pain had once burned. Now only a reminder of the strength found in dignity. Dignity is a right, not a privilege. And if it were you, when you see a bell that must be rung, what would you do?